At my mother-in-law's charity gala, she was dragged out by security in front of 500 of the city's elite, while I stood at the microphone with a folder full of her secrets. But that wasn't the beginning of our war. That was the end. The beginning was 6 months earlier, at a dinner invitation that arrived a week late, folded in half like an afterthought. My name wasn't even handwritten on the envelope, just a cold, printed label, as if it was junk mail. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I walked straight into their trap. The Whitmore estate reeked of old money and older grudges. My fiancé, David, squeezed my hand as we entered the marble foyer. "Just smile, okay? They'll come around eventually." I knew better. Some people don't come around. Some people circle like vultures waiting for you to show weakness. His mother, Patricia, swept down the grand staircase in pearls that probably cost more than my car. She kissed David's cheek, then looked at me like I'd tracked mud across her Persian rug. "You're here," she said. "Not welcome, not lovely to see you. Just you're here, like I was a stain she'd have to deal with later." Dinner was psychological warfare disguised as small talk. "That's an interesting dress," Patricia said, her eyes scanning me like a judge at a livestock auction. "So accessible." Richard, David's father, joined in with surgical precision. "Sarah, David mentioned you're between positions right now. How fortunate to have such flexibility during this time." Between positions? I'd told him I'd been job hunting for 3 months since moving to the city for David. But the way Richard said it made unemployment sound like a moral failing. David's sister Veronica smirked from across the table. "Not everyone adapts quickly to our family's standards." Every comment was a test. Every pause, a judgment. I sat there with my hands folded, nails digging crescents into my palms, playing the sweet, naive bride-to-be while my blood boiled. Then Patricia delivered the killing blow. "Sarah, dear," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "I do hope you understand that if David ever realizes this marriage was a mistake, we'll be here to help him correct it." The dining room went dead silent. Crystal glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the staff hovering at the edges of the room seemed to hold their breath. David sputtered, "Mother, what are you—" I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Everyone expected me to cry, to storm out, to prove I was exactly the emotional, unsuitable woman they believed I was. Instead, I picked up my wine glass with steady hands, took a slow sip, and smiled. "Good," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silence. "Because if I ever realize it's a mistake, I'll be correcting it too. And Patricia, I promise you won't like how I handle mistakes." For just a moment, her perfect composure cracked. I saw something flicker behind those cold blue eyes. Fear. That's when I knew she wasn't just testing me anymore. She was threatened by me. And that's when I realized this dinner wasn't about welcoming me into the family. It was a declaration of war. Fine, I'd give her exactly what she wanted. But first, I needed to find out what Patricia was really afraid of. Because powerful women like her don't attack unless they have something to lose. And I had a feeling that that something wasn't just about her son David. 3 weeks after that disastrous dinner, I discovered Patricia's first secret. I wasn't supposed to be at the country club that Tuesday morning. My yoga class had been canceled, so I decided to treat myself to coffee at the club's terrace cafe. David's family membership had its perks, even if I wasn't entirely welcome to use them. That's when I saw Patricia at a corner table, deep in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. Nothing unusual about that. She was always networking, schmoozing, playing the social butterfly. But something about their body language seemed wrong. Patricia kept glancing around nervously, and the man was taking notes in a small black notebook. When she handed him an envelope thick with what looked like cash, my curiosity turned to suspicion. I snapped a photo with my phone just as the man stood to leave. He was tall, professionally dressed, with the kind of unremarkable face that could disappear in any crowd. Perfect for someone whose job required invisibility. After he left, Patricia sat alone for several minutes, staring at her coffee with an expression I'd never seen before. Not her usual mask of superiority, genuine worry. That evening, I ran a reverse image search on the photo. It took some digging, but I found him. Brad Dunley, licensed private investigator specializing in discreet family matters. Patricia had hired a PI. But to investigate what? The obvious answer was me. She wanted dirt on my past, ammunition for her campaign to destroy my marriage. I'd expected something like this. What I didn't expect was the call I received the next morning. "Miss Jennings?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "This is Brad Dunley from Dunley Investigations. I believe your future mother-in-law hired me to look into some family matters, but I think you should know she's not investigating you." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "She's investigating your fiancé, and what I found, well, let's just say it's not what she expected. Can we meet?" An hour later, I sat across from Brad Dunley in a downtown coffee shop, staring at a manila folder that would change everything. "Mrs. Whitmore hired me to dig up dirt on David's past relationships," Brad explained. "She wanted proof he'd made bad choices before. Ammunition to convince him you were just another mistake." "And?" "David's record is spotless. Model citizen, faithful in every relationship, never so much as a parking ticket. But while I was researching him, I stumbled across something else." He slid the folder across the table. "Financial records showing regular payments from Patricia's personal account to an LLC called Meridian Holdings." I opened the folder. Bank statements, incorporation documents, property deeds, all connected by one name, Patricia Whitmore. "She owns 3 properties through this shell company," Brad continued. "Properties she's been renting to the city for various municipal projects. The interesting part is how she got those contracts. The documents told the story. Patricia had used her social connections to influence city council members, securing lucrative rental agreements for properties she'd bought specifically for that purpose. Not exactly illegal, but ethically questionable, especially since she sat on the budget oversight committee that approved the payments." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Brad's smile was grim. "Because Patricia refused to pay my final invoice when I told her I couldn't find any dirt on David. She called me incompetent, threatened to ruin my business, and suggested I manufacture evidence if I wanted to get paid." "So this is revenge?" "This is justice. I've been in this business 15 years. I've never had a client ask me to fabricate evidence." He closed the folder. "That's yours. Use it wisely." As I drove home, my mind raced. Patricia's corruption was my insurance policy, but it was also dangerous. If she'd crossed ethical lines for money, what would she do to protect her reputation? That evening, David came home excited about a job interview he'd landed at Meridian Financial, one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. "It's perfect timing," he said, loosening his tie. "The position pays nearly double what I'm making now, and Harrison Davidson personally recommended me." Harrison Davidson, the same man who'd been at Patricia's dinner parties for years. "That's wonderful," I said carefully. "How did Mr. Davidson know you were looking for a new position?" "Mom mentioned it to him. She thought he might have connections." My blood turned to ice. Patricia wasn't just trying to destroy me. She was positioning David exactly where she wanted him. A job at Davidson's firm would tie him to her social circle, make him financially dependent on her connections, and give her leverage over our marriage. But there was something else. If Patricia controlled David's career prospects, she controlled our entire future. And if I ever threatened to expose her corruption, she could destroy David's professional life with a single phone call. I was trapped, or so she thought. That night, I made a decision that would either save my marriage or destroy it completely. I was going to war with Patricia Whitmore, but I wasn't going to fight fair, because I just realized something crucial. Patricia's biggest weakness wasn't her corruption or her snobbishness or even her hatred of me. It was her absolute certainty that she was smarter than everyone else, and I was about to prove her very, very wrong. That night, I texted my wedding planner asking if my white and blush roses had arrived for Saturday's ceremony. Isabella called at 8 a.m., sobbing. "Sarah, I'm so sorry." Isabella's voice was thick with tears. "I think I've been tricked. Your flowers for the ceremony? They're gone." I sat up in bed, immediately alert. "What do you mean, gone?" "Yesterday afternoon, someone called me on a new phone number claiming to be your mother-in-law, Patricia. She said you decided the original flowers were too common for the Whitmore family standards and wanted black and red arrangements instead." Black and red, funeral colors. Patricia wasn't just sabotaging my wedding, she was turning it into a wake. Isabella continued. "When I got your text last night asking about the white roses, I got confused. I tried calling Patricia back on the number she'd given me, but it was disconnected, so I called her regular number this morning." My stomach dropped. What did she say? She completely denied making any call about flowers. She said she never requested any changes and claimed someone must have cloned her voice. But Sarah, I heard her voice clearly yesterday. It was definitely her. The pieces clicked together. Patricia had used a burner phone to make the call, then destroyed the evidence and was now claiming innocence. I immediately called the florist, but they'd already sold your white roses to another client. There's no way to replace them in time for Saturday. I'm so sorry. Our wedding was in 4 days. The roses Isabella was talking about had been ordered 6 months ago, specially grown for our ceremony. Isabella, Patricia absolutely made that call. She's lying about her voice being cloned, and she is systematically trying to sabotage my wedding. I need you to reverse every single change she has made, and I need you to do it now. But the roses are already... Find new roses. Call every florist in the state if you have to. And Isabella, from now on, don't take instructions from anyone except me, in person, with photo ID. After I hung up, I sat there processing what had happened. This wasn't just wedding sabotage. This was calculated deception using burner phones and false denials. Patricia was more cunning than I'd realized. But she'd also made her first real mistake. I called Brad Dunley. I need to hire you, I said without preamble. Patricia's escalated her attacks, and I need to know exactly what she's planning next. What kind of timeline are we talking about? My wedding is Saturday. Whatever she's planning, it's happening soon. I'll need access to her communications, her schedule, maybe even her home. Consider it done. That afternoon, I drove to the Whitmore estate with a peace offering, freshly baked cookies, and an apology for my rudeness at dinner. Patricia received me in her sitting room, practically purring with satisfaction. Sarah, how thoughtful. I was beginning to worry you didn't understand how families like ours resolve our differences. I've been thinking about what you said, I replied, handing her the cookie tin, about making sure David doesn't make a mistake. I realize we want the same thing, his happiness. Patricia's smile was razor sharp. How perceptive. Perhaps you're more adaptable than I thought. While she gloated, I excused myself to use the powder room. Instead, I slipped into her study and placed the tiny recording device Brad had given me inside the decorative lamp on her desk. The wireless camera went behind the bookshelf, virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Technology has made surveillance remarkably easy, Brad had explained. These devices will transmit everything, audio, video, even screenshots if she uses her computer in that room. By the time I returned to the sitting room, Patricia was on her phone. Yes, everything's proceeding perfectly, she was saying. The girl is finally seeing reason. The girl, not Sarah, not David's wife. The girl. I smiled sweetly as she hung up. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Nothing that can't wait. Now, about this wedding of yours. For the next hour, Patricia lectured me about appropriate behavior for a Whitmore bride. I nodded and agreed and played the part of the chastened daughter-in-law while my hidden devices recorded every word. That evening, Brad called with the first intelligence reports. Your mother-in-law is busy, he said. 3 phone calls to the wedding venue about safety concerns that might require last-minute evacuations. 2 calls to local news outlets about interesting developments at Saturday's society wedding. And 1 very long conversation with someone called Veronica about the final phase. Veronica's her daughter, David's sister. Well, they're planning something big for your wedding day. Veronica's supposed to arrive 2 hours before the ceremony with some kind of evidence that's going to change everything. Evidence. My mind raced through possibilities. Fake documents about my past, manufactured photos, a paid actor claiming to be a secret ex-boyfriend. Did they say what kind of evidence? Not specifically, but Patricia mentioned something about family bloodlines and protecting the legacy. Does that mean anything to you? It meant everything. Patricia wasn't just trying to humiliate me at my own wedding. She was planning to claim I wasn't worthy of the Whitmore name on a genetic level. Probably some fabricated story about my family history, my parents' background, anything that would suggest I was beneath their social status. But I had 4 days to turn her plan against her, and I just thought of the perfect way to do it. The next morning, I called my maid of honor with an unusual request. Emma, I need you to do something that's going to sound crazy, but I promise there's a good reason. By Thursday evening, I had everything in place. Patricia's surveillance devices were feeding me real-time intelligence about her movements and conversations. Brad had uncovered the full scope of her corruption, not just the property scheme, but tax evasion, charity fund misappropriation, and a network of favor trading that reached into City Hall. Most importantly, I'd prepared for whatever evidence Veronica was planning to present. Friday night, the rehearsal dinner went off without a hitch. Patricia played the gracious hostess, welcoming extended family and family friends with perfect charm. She even gave a touching speech about family bonds and welcoming new members with open hearts. If I hadn't known what was coming, I might have believed she'd actually accepted me. But I knew better. The real Patricia was the woman I'd watched on my hidden cameras, the one who'd spent the week orchestrating my public humiliation. As guests mingled over champagne and canapes, I caught Veronica checking her phone repeatedly. Whatever she was waiting for, it was almost time. David found me on the terrace, looking out over the estate's gardens. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Should I be? My family can be intense, but they're good people underneath all the drama." I leaned back against his chest, feeling the weight of everything I knew and couldn't tell him. Not yet. "David, whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to remember something. I love you. Everything I do because I love you." He turned me around, studying my face with concern. "Sarah, what's wrong? You sound like you're saying goodbye." "Not goodbye," I said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "More like, hello." Because tomorrow, Patricia Whitmore was going to learn exactly who she'd been underestimating. And I had a feeling she wasn't going to like the lesson. The morning of my wedding, Veronica arrived at the bridal suite carrying a manila envelope and wearing the expression of someone about to deliver very bad news. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, dismissing my bridesmaids with a wave. Privately. I'd been expecting this moment for days, but my heart still hammered as I watched my friends reluctantly file out of the room. Whatever Patricia had planned, it was about to begin. "Of course, Veronica, what's on your mind?" She set the envelope on the vanity table like it contained radioactive material. "I want you to know this gives me no pleasure," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But family is family, and the Whitmore name means something in this city." "I'm sure it does. Which is why I can't let you marry my brother under false pretenses." She pushed the envelope toward me. "These are private investigator reports about your real family background, about who you really are." I stared at the envelope, letting silence stretch between us. Veronica was fidgeting now, clearly uncomfortable with her role as the bearer of devastating news. "Go ahead," she said. "Open it." Instead, I picked up my phone. "Actually, Veronica, I think your mother should be here for this conversation." I speed-dialed Patricia's number. "Patricia, could you come to the bridal suite? Veronica has something she wants to discuss with both of us." "Sarah, that's not—" "I think family conversations should include the whole family, don't you?" Patricia arrived within minutes, impeccably dressed and radiating false concern. "Girls, what's this about? We have a wedding starting in 2 hours." "Veronica has brought some information about my background," I said calmly. "Information I think you'll find very interesting." Patricia's eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to me. For just a moment, I saw uncertainty cross her face. "Well," she said carefully, "if there are family matters to discuss." "Oh, there definitely are." I picked up the envelope and opened it slowly, making a show of examining the contents. Fascinating research. Very thorough. The documents were exactly what I'd expected. Fabricated evidence claiming my father had been involved in some financial scandal years ago, suggesting my family had ties to organized crime, even a fake DNA report questioning my mother's fidelity. Pure fiction, but convincing enough to plant doubt in David's mind if presented at the right moment. "I have to say," I continued, "I'm impressed by the effort that went into this, creating fake police reports, forging court documents, even manufacturing DNA evidence. This must have cost a fortune." Patricia went very still. "What are you talking about?" I smiled and pulled out my own folder, one I'd prepared specifically for this moment. "I'm talking about fraud, Patricia. Criminal fraud. Because you see, I knew you were planning something like this, so I had my own investigator verify every single document in this envelope." I spread the papers across the vanity table. Official letterhead from the police departments that supposedly issued the fake reports. Letters from the DNA laboratory confirming they'd never tested anyone in my family. court records showing that the alleged financial scandal involving my father never happened. Every single page in your folder is fabricated, which means you didn't just hire a private investigator. You hired someone to commit forgery and fraud. Veronica had gone pale. Mother, you said these were legitimate. Furthermore, I continued, I have recordings of your phone conversations discussing this plan. Detailed records of payments to the people who created these fake documents. And most importantly, I have testimony from Brad Dunley, the private investigator you fired when he refused to manufacture evidence against David. Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. The gracious hostess disappeared, replaced by something cold and vicious. You little bitch, she hissed. You think you can threaten me? Do you have any idea who I am in this city? I know exactly who you are, I replied. You're a woman who spent years using charity funds for personal gain, manipulating city contracts through corrupt connections, and now committing fraud to destroy your son's marriage. The question is, do you know who I am? I pulled out my final surprise, a business card that made both women's faces drain of color. Sarah Jennings, Senior Analyst, Financial Crimes Division, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence in the room was deafening. That's right, I said softly. I'm a federal agent. I moved to this city as part of an ongoing investigation into municipal corruption, and your name came up repeatedly in our files. Meeting David was purely coincidental, but falling in love with him was real. Patricia sank into a chair as if her legs had given out. Everything you've done since I entered this family has been documented as evidence. The property scheme, the charity fund misappropriation, the fraud you commissioned for today, it's all part of a federal case that's been building for months. You're lying, Veronica whispered. You're a marketing coordinator. David told us. That's my cover identity. And it worked perfectly because you were so convinced I was beneath you that you never bothered to verify anything about me. I walked to the window, looking out at the wedding guests beginning to gather in the garden. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk downstairs, smile at all those cameras, and behave perfectly during my wedding ceremony. Because if you cause any disruption, if you say one word to David about any of this, I'll have agents arrest you in front of every society photographer in the city. Patricia found her voice. And if we cooperate, then you get to keep what's left of your reputation while you face the federal charges quietly. No perp walk, no media circus, no humiliation in front of your social circle. But the charges are happening regardless. The investigation is complete. Your cooperation today just determines how publicly you're destroyed. I checked my watch. I have a wedding to get to. Veronica, you can stay and help your mother process this, or you can come downstairs and act like nothing happened. Your choice. As I reached the door, Patricia called out one last time. Sarah, Agent Jennings, why? You could have arrested me months ago. Why wait until today? I turned back, and for the first time since I'd entered that family, I let her see exactly who I really was. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. Because I wanted to give you every opportunity to be a decent human being, and you chose corruption every single time. But mostly because I wanted David to see his mother's true character, before he had to choose between his family and his wife. And what about David? When will you tell him the truth? I smiled. I already have. He's known what I really do for work since our third date. The only people who believed the marketing coordinator story were the ones too arrogant to ask the right questions. 20 minutes later, I walked down the aisle in my grandmother's wedding dress toward the man I loved, while my future mother-in-law sat in the front row with a smile frozen on her face and federal agents positioned discreetly throughout the crowd. It wasn't the wedding I'd originally planned. It was so much better. 3 months after our wedding, Patricia made her final mistake. The Whitmore Foundation Gala was her last stand, one final attempt to reclaim her social position and humiliate me publicly. She'd convinced the board to let her chair the event, promising a record-breaking fundraising night. What she didn't know was that I'd been feeding information to the foundation's president about her financial irregularities for weeks. The Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal and ambition. Patricia held court in a silver gown, accepting praise from the city's elite while I watched from across the room in David's grandmother's sapphire necklace. You look stunning, David whispered as we approached the head table. Are you ready for this? I squeezed his hand. More ready than she is. Patricia greeted us with poisonous sweetness. Sarah, dear, how lovely that you could attend. I wasn't sure this would be quite your scene. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied. After all, transparency in charitable organizations is so important to me. Her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. Of course, we're all committed to the highest ethical standards. As dinner progressed, I noticed Patricia making frequent trips to speak with board members. She was working the room desperately, trying to shore up support before the evening's main event. Thomas Whitmore III, the foundation's president, approached our table during dessert. Sarah, I wanted to thank you again for bringing those financial concerns to our attention. The board takes such matters very seriously. Patricia's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Of course, Thomas. When I see potential conflicts of interest, I feel obligated to speak up. Quite right. In fact, we've decided to make some changes to our oversight procedures. Patricia, perhaps you could join us for a brief board meeting after your speech? Patricia's face went white, but she nodded graciously. Certainly. As Thomas walked away, she leaned toward me. What did you do? Nothing more than my civic duty, I said sweetly. Citizens have a responsibility to report potential charity fraud, don't you think? The color drained completely from her face as she realized the trap I'd laid. When Patricia took the microphone for her keynote speech, she was visibly shaken. Her usual commanding presence had been replaced by nervous energy. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice slightly unsteady, the Whitmore Foundation has always stood for excellence and integrity. But as she spoke, federal agents quietly entered the ballroom. Brad Dunley had coordinated perfectly with my FBI colleagues. Patricia's voice faltered as she noticed the agents taking positions around the room. We must always be vigilant against those who would exploit. She trailed off completely as Agent Morrison, my former partner, approached the stage with an arrest warrant. Patricia Whitmore, you're under arrest for charity fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit document forgery. The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers as handcuffs clicked around Patricia's wrists. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment of her humiliation. David grabbed my hand under the table. How long have you known this was coming? Since before we met, I said quietly. The investigation was already underway. Meeting you was coincidence, but falling in love was real. As Patricia was led away, she looked back at me with pure hatred. You destroyed everything, she mouthed. I raised my wine glass in a small salute. She'd destroyed herself. I just documented the process. The aftermath was swift. By Monday, Patricia had been removed from 3 boards. Her charity luncheons were canceled. The society pages began referring to her in past tense. David's family called an emergency meeting. They demanded we divorce. His father even offered me $500,000 to disappear. But the power structure had already shifted. Thomas Whitmore contacted me about expanding my role with the foundation. The same people who'd once deferred to Patricia were now choosing me. At our first family dinner after the gala, Patricia barely looked at me. Richard tried to negotiate terms for peaceful coexistence. I laid out my conditions. Treat David and me as equals. No more sabotage. Clear boundaries. In return, I wouldn't expose Patricia's other financial irregularities. They agreed. They had no choice. 6 months later, I was appointed to the foundation's executive committee. Patricia attended and actually applauded, though it probably killed her inside. The war was over. I'd won completely. But more importantly, David was finally free from his mother's manipulation. Our marriage was stronger than ever. Patricia had forgotten who she was dealing with. She thought she could destroy me because I seemed like an easy target. She was wrong. Sometimes when toxic people push you to the wall, you have to push back harder than they ever expected. So here's my question for you. What would you do if your in-laws tried to destroy your marriage? Have you ever had to stand up to family manipulation like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Trust me, the next video involves an even crazier family drama. You won't believe how it turns out, but fortunately, you don't have to wait long. Click the video on your screen to watch it now.